So I just finished listening to Carolyn Cummings interview Ralph Blodgett on the 21st of May, 1996. I had to take a lot of notes on this one. I couldn't believe what a fantastic servant Ralph Blodgett was to the community and to our country, to the state of Texas, to the Panhandle of Texas. What a fantastic legacy this man has left here in Spearman and Hansford County. He one of the most interesting things, I'm reading from my notes, so forgive me. He started school at the age of 4. He was reading when he was 3 years old. He is one of the former mayors and the only mayor emeritus of Spearman, Texas. He was on the board of the Panhandle Regional Planning Commission. He was also the president of the Texas Municipal League. Our present mayor today, Toby Shields, is very involved in the Texas Municipal League and works his tail off, for the city as well. And we talk about, people who serve the communities and the counties, the communities within Hansford County. This is a labor of love. You're not paid to do it. He was an Army Airforce veteran and served during the World War II time in the military. He had graduated from Texas Tech in 1941 and then was serving in the Army Air Force thereafter. He is one of the founders of Caprock Industries, the first 2 feedlots that were built in Hansford County. He sold out of that venture, and then eventually Caprock was purchased by Cargill, and now those 2 feed yards are independently owned. You know them today as Hansford County Feeders, which used to be Caprock 2, and USA Feed Yard, which is what we called Caprock 1. B&B Farm Industries was his main income at the time that this was recorded. B&B Farm Industries is what we know today as Farmers Ag on the Perryton Highway, just on the north side of Spearman, going out of town toward Perryton. And that was a place that you bought fertilizer and so on. Great story in here about a pet prairie dog. I could go on and on. It was fascinating. I laughed out loud. Great man. And I never met Ralph Blodgett. I know his grandkids, Grady and Brandy. I also know his daughter, Marilyn, Grady's mom, and Brandy's dad, Dr. Blodgett, the late Dr. Glenn Blodgett. We really miss him. He was one of the greatest veterinarians I've ever known. But without any more delay, Ralph Blodgett, have a great one.
We welcome you to Hansford Information on KRDF, and here with today's guest, your hostess, Carolyn Cummings.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Hansford Information. This morning we have another in our series of Hansford Memories, and today is May 21st, 1996, and with us this morning is C. Ralph Blodgett. Good morning, Ralph.
Good morning.
And we're going to talk about family history of your grandfather Milo and your mother's family, the Patricks, and your community involvement, your business, and just some interesting stories about when you were growing up. Does that about cover it?
Oh, I think that'd be more than enough.
More than enough. Well, we'll get into that right after this message.
Cindy here from the Environmental Defense Fund at the supermarket with some smart shoppers. Well, ladies and gentlemen, what's for dinner? Pudding! Excellent. What kind? Vanilla, chocolate, lemon mousse. Oh, how sophisticated. Why, thank you. Okay, shoppers, when shopping for pudding, what's the most important things to look for on the label? 100% pudding! besides that? Package made from recycled material. Bingo. All sorts of products and packaging are now being made from the paper, plastic, metal, and glass that you recycle. But to keep recycling working, buy those products. So when you pick up a package, read the label. Just make sure it's pudding. It's for all kinds of products. As long as they're pudding. Cindy's saying for a free brochure on buying recycled, call 1-800-CALL-EDF or 1-800-PUDDING. Come on. Oh, all right. 1-800-CALL-EDF. This message from the Ad Council, the US EPA, and the Environmental Defense Fund.
Welcome back to Hansford Information, and this morning with our Hansford Memories we have Ralph Blodgett. And Ralph, let's start off by establishing where your family came and where this Blodgett family in the Panhandle started.
Well, in the beginning, my grandfather, Milo Blodgett, was born in Leaf Valley, Minnesota in 1871. He came to the Panhandle in 1886 when he was 15 years old, and he worked first on the Moody Ranch, which was northwest of Canadian a little ways, and then in 1888 he went to work for the old Creswell Ranch, or the Barcy, and it was a ranch that, the northern boundary was about where the city of Perryton is. The western boundary was a little bit into Hansford County, and the southern boundary went all the way through Roberts County and Hemphill County, and some below there. So it was a big ranch to work on. Then in 1896, he married my grandmother Blodgett. Myrtle May Walsted was a member of a Norwegian family that immigrated to this country early on, about in 1879, I believe, when they first came. And they came to New York and then worked their way on to... First he came as they worked his way on for passage on a sailing ship and earned enough money in New York and finally in Iowa to send for his family. And then my great-grandmother, Walsted, and 4 children crossed the ocean on a sailing ship and found their way by a tag around her neck to Human, Iowa. Then later they moved to Medicine Lodge, Kansas, and then on down to Canadian. Now my grandfather, of course, was a Canadian then, and they married in 96 and lived there until in Roberts County until they moved to the old Blodgett home place out in the edge of southwestern corner of Occotree County, just across the line from Hansford County. They moved there, I think, in 1899, maybe 1900. And that's the Blodgett community sprang from that. Then Mother's people came from Alabama. She was a Patrick. She married J.P. Patrick. Her dad was J.P. Patrick. And they moved from Alabama to Hopkins County at Sulphur Springs, where my mother was born. Then they came to, in 1911, they moved to Old Occotree. And my mother, I think, had 8 sisters and 2 brothers. And the youngest Patrick child isn't but about probably 7 years older than I am. And Mother graduated from high school at Old Occotree. And she didn't say in her interview, but she did go to what was then Canyon Normal long enough, or West Texas now, long enough to get a teaching certificate, and then she taught at Old Occotree for a while at a place north of Perryton for a short time, then out in the Blodgett community at the old Blodgett school, and there she met my dad, and they married in 1918. I was born in 1920, and I had a sister that was born, Pauline, that was born in 1922. And when my dad got hurt on a motorcycle accident coming from Hansford out to where we lived. We got our mail at Hansford instead of Spearman. And he fractured his skull, And in those days, they had no antibiotics and no way to take care of it, and the medical profession wasn't as far along as they are now. And as a result, he had terrible headaches for several years, and a tumor developed on his brain, and he died in 1922. I was just very small. I don't remember him at all. And Mother was pregnant with my sister when he died. And then my little sister died in 1928 from smallpox, which almost killed my mother. But, and then, to cap it all off, my grandfather, Blodgett, died in 1932. My dad had been a partner with him in business, farming and ranching, which my mother inherited, and they were in business together when he died. So I don't know how Mother ever survived all that. I really don't.
A lot of you probably heard the interview last night of Mrs. Dita Blodgett, and she talked about those days and what a wonderful man your grandfather was and your grandmother, and how she made it through it. It was tough on her, but she seemed to be a very fighting spirited lady and a very much a pioneer lady. But in your you were talking about the Blodgett School. Your mother had a sister that was a teacher at Blodgett School.
Yes, when Mother married, Mother was a teacher there, and then when she married my dad, Mother's sister, Dessa Patrick, which was quite a bit younger than my mother, came and lived in our home and was a school teacher. And she made a big mistake. She started teaching me how to read when I was 3. And when I was 4, she had to walk to school every morning to teach, 1.25 miles. And about 10 minutes after she'd leave, I'd leave. And I'd go to the schoolhouse, and I do that every day. So Mother finally just decided that she got tired of walking up there to get me, so she let me start school when I was 4.
That's a very young age. It really is. But you evidently had high hopes at age 4, because not only did you go to school, you were telling us a little earlier that you started driving at 4.
Yes. Of course, out in the Blodgett community at that time, about the only farmland in that area was right at our old home place. And then a man by the name of Grimes had a farm about 3 miles north, and it was very small. My mother later bought that place, and that was the only farmland there. So my grandfather was in the threshing business, and he worked a lot of people. And we had an old Model T runabout that we used as what we call today a pickup. And I went everywhere he went, I went. And if he went to court, I went to court. And if he went to whatever he did, I went with him. And he'd send me to the house to get drinking water for the men, or to take word to my mother, who was the cook for all these men. And I'd have to stand up to drive that old Model T, but I did. And I'd drive it, but it was not down the road, it was across pasture land. So I did learn to drive when I was 4.
Even though you all had the pickup and you had a car, you on your little profile you gave us, you talked about coming into Spearman in a buggy. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. I think it was either in 1925 or 26. The dates I can't put all together, but I do know that when we left our house there, where our old home house stands today, we drove on with a buggy in a northwesterly direction all the way to Spearman, and didn't have to open a gate. The only place we had to deviate from a straight line was the old Wilbanks place, which is about 3 miles south and 3 miles east of Spearman. And they had a small pasture that they farmed to grow feed for their animals. We had to go around that. Other than that, it was a straight line all the way to Spearman.
You have some early memories of downtown Spearman that I think are kind of neat. One is about the paving of the streets on Spearman.
Yes, we bought our staple goods, our groceries from P.M. Mays, and the old building still stands on Main Street. And I can remember sitting on the street and watching them put the bricks in the pavement, and I think that year was 25 or 26. I know they placed each brick, and instead, like they use mortar nowadays, they used hot tar then to keep the bricks together. I suppose to make it waterproof. But I watched them put the brick down on that one day while they were paving Main Street.
Do you think that was kind of a foretelling of the fact that you'd be mayor of Spearman someday and take care of and have all that responsibility?
Oh, no, I don't think so.
You don't think so? What years were you mayor?
I was mayor. I had to call Cheryl to find this out, but I was mayor from 76 to 88. And I had never dreamed about even being mayor at all. But one day, a man, I can't recall his name now, but he represented bonding companies, had come to Spearman and had examined their ability to pay the bonded indebtedness. And through a very lax city manager that they had at the time, they'd used money that was dedicated to retiring bonds to do basic street and water line and gas line improvements, which is not stealing money at all, but it was a violation of their contract on bonded indebtedness. And he walked in my office, and he told me, he said that man at City Hall, who I later found out was Mark Neff, he wasn't the manager, he was the assistant, had told him about me, and he came down and he told me, he says, now if you'll run for mayor and promise to get this city in order, I'll not call these bonds. And that's why I ran for mayor in 1976. And I was mayor for 12 years till 1988. And incidentally, we paid all those bonds off, and the city was in good shape when I left, and I think still is. But it was a privilege to serve, but 12 years is sure long enough.
Sure, long enough. Well, not only were you mayor, but you served the community in several other ways. You were, was it president of the Texas Municipal League?
Yes, I was president of the league in 1983 and 84. I was on the TML board from 78 till I went off in 88. And I was chairman, was on the PRPC board, which is Panhandle Regional Planning Commission. I was on their board from 77 to 87, and I was chairman of that group in 1986.
Well, according
excuse me, I was a chairman in 81 to 82.
Okay. Well, according to your the history book, the Spearman and Hansford County history book, you were also a president of the Chamber of Commerce. You were on the hospital board, an elder in the Presbyterian Church. Georgia handed me a note. Spearman's only mayor in
Emeritus.
Emeritus?
Yeah.
Now, exactly what does that mean?
Well, I don't know. It's just a glorified way to say thank you, I think. But anyway, I was declared to be their mayor in perpetuity emeritus, and I appreciated that. Don't have any voice, but I don't have any vote, but I can have a voice.
It's an honorary decree placed upon a person who has done an outstanding job in serving their community or serving that particular position. And so Ralph will be the mayor of Spearman forever and ever, and justifiably so. Very deserved man.
Thanks, George. I'm still catching up on Spearman. I've only lived here 25 years, Ralph, so I'm still finding out about all these things. Why don't we take a real quick break, and we'll come back and maybe talk about some of your early business dealings and some of the interesting people you've met along the way. Okay?
That'll be fine.
We'll be back after this message.
Before you listen to this radio commercial, take off all your clothes. I'll wait. Okay, everything off? Good. Now, go and look at yourself in a mirror, front and back. Be thorough. Then come back. Oh, back already? Well, when you looked in the mirror, did you notice anything weird? How about your moles or freckles? Have they changed in shape or colour? Or do you see a new blemish that you didn't have before? Is it larger than a quarter inch or multicoloured? Is it irregular in shape? If so, you may have melanoma or another form of skin cancer. Left alone, melanoma will spread throughout your body and eventually kill you. That's why you should examine yourself regularly. And if you have any questions, see a dermatologist. Melanoma can be cured if caught early. Okay, you can put your clothes back on now. I won't look. This message brought to you by the American Academy of Dermatology.
Welcome back to Hansford Information. We're visiting with Ralph Blodgett this morning on our Hansford Memories. And we've kind of talked about him being mayor and also from where his family originated and kind of what they did. Ralph, you went to school here and then went on to further your education. You might tell us about that, and then how you came to be in B&B.
Well, I went to school at the Blodgett School, as I said earlier, that I started when I was 4, and I think I went to school there, and the Blodgett School as a school closed, I think, in 1933, and the students were transferred to Spearman. I believe it was in 33. I know Greta Lawrence, who is now married to Woodville Jarvis, was my homeroom teacher, first homeroom teacher, when I came to Spearman. I graduated here in 1936 and went to college at Texas Tech. I don't know how my mother ever sent me to school, but anyway, I worked while I was going to school, and I sold books and bought books in the bookstore for the 5 years that I was there. I started out in engineering for a year, and I didn't like it very much, and I transferred to the business school, so I had to go 5 years to get a degree. I had quite a few more hours than it took to get a degree, but I had to go to school 5 years to do it. But I graduated at Tech in 1941, and for a short time I worked in Oklahoma in construction work, and then went into the Army, and I was in the Air Force. I was a weather meteorology department, a weather forecaster, and I served at Amarillo, Tampa, and Dalhart, and then they transferred me to Calcutta, India, and from Calcutta to Dhaka, India, which is now Bangladesh, and a short time in Bangkok, Siam, back to Calcutta, and finally came home. And when I got back to Spearman, I bought a car in Florida, and a friend of mine, little brother, came with me. He was going to work through the summer, and we stopped at Canadian to buy gas, and a Texas Tech car drove into the station. A car with a Tech sticker on it drove into the station. It was full of girls, which interested me, and also this fellow kid with me. And Joanne was driving the car, and that's how I met my wife. And then we married in we got married in 46 in December, and we will have been married December the 27th this year, 50 years.
Congratulations. That's a good long time. We wish you very many, many more.
And back into the business, I started helping my mother farm, and I rented some land of my own. then she purchased the old Harding Grain Company here. She and Merle Beck together purchased the old Harding Grain Company, and I went to work in that at what I call my spare time. And several years later, I bought Merle out, and the progression was from B&B Grain into Caprock feedlots, and then from that I sold the elevator to the feedlots, and we became B&B Farm Industries, and that's where we are today.
Now, the Caprock Industries were two of the largest feedlots at that time in Texas, weren't they?
I believe that's right. I think there was 10 of us that put the feedlots in, and I decided that was too much of a gamble for me after a couple of years, and I sold my interest out.
Mm-hmm.
And it has changed hands 2 or 3 times, but now it's owned by Cargill, and that's the type of people that it takes to financially run a successful big feedlots like they do.
Now about B&B, why don't you tell us a little bit about that business, and people in the future will know what you did.
Well, B&B started in 1947. At that time was a partnership between Dieter Blodgett and Merle Beck, and Merle came to this country in I think about 1910 or 11 as a young man, and he worked for my granddad, and he and my father were very good friends. And Merle had been successful in his way farming. My granddad had helped him buy some land, and which he developed. And but Merle and I were not very compatible in the grain business, and I guess I was too progressive for Merle. But anyway, I bought him out, I think, in about 1953 or 4. I bought his interest, and since that time, it has been a Blodgett enterprise. And before my mother's death, she had started transferring her stock to me and to my wife and to my children. And then this was back when you could transfer $30,000. And then we would in turn transfer what she had given to Joanne and I on to our children. So now it's owned principally, I think Joanne and I have 52% of the stock, and Glenn and Marilyn have 48.
That would be Glenn Blodgett, your son, and Marilyn Blodgett Klein.
Right.
Okay. Now, we need to get into some of these stories, because you've got some real good stories of Spearman, and that in itself is some history. Where do you want to start? With which story?
Well, I don't know. I've got a lot of people say I'm full of stories, and I guess I did a lot of things in my younger days. I think probably the one that most people will remember. When I was just a kid, I caught a little prairie dog away from his hole. I mean, he was really small. And I took him and kept him, made a pet out of him. And I trained him to sit up and bark for peanuts. And that was a real handy thing, because on Saturdays, we didn't come to town every day like people do now. A lot of Saturdays we didn't come. And when I came, I didn't have any money to spend. I might have a dime to go to the show on, and a nickel to buy a bottle of pop at the variety store. But I could take this prairie dog down in front of Maud Mays' store, because Uncle Johnny O'Laughlin usually always came to buy groceries there on Saturday. And if I'd get that prairie dog to set up and bark for peanuts, and that was always good for a quarter at least from Uncle Johnny O'Laughlin, and maybe 50 cents if I was lucky. And that was a big day's entertainment for a young boy back in the 20s in Spearman, Texas.
Well, it kept you occupied just getting that little prairie dog trained.
Yes, and of course he had his demise. One winter, cold winter, we had those great big steel stoves in one room. We didn't have heated bedrooms. The living room had the heat in the kitchen. So when it was real cold, we'd sit around this stove, and my granddad come in from a hard day's work, and when he sat down in his favorite chair, this prairie dog was in it, and he sat on him, and this prairie dog bit him. And into the stove he went.
Uh-oh. That was the end of the prairie dog.
That was the end of my meal ticket, too.
Before we went on the air, you mentioned that you'd started driving at an early age, and you had a story about the World's Fair, but you also had a story about a famous visitor that came out on the ranch. You might relate those to the people.
Well, I think, again, my memory is a little bit foggy, but I think this was in about 1925 or 26. I was sitting on the front porch late one afternoon, and this big car drove in, a great big car, fancy car, and this gentleman got out that was dressed in a suit and came up to the door and asked me if Milo Blodgett lived here. And I said yes. He's milking the cows. So he went out to the barn. In a little bit they came back, walking back, and when they walked up to where I was, my granddad said, "Junior, this is Will Rogers." And he was a great storyteller. And what he was coming from New York on his way to California to make a motion picture. And Will Rogers had worked as a cowboy at Higgins, Texas, for a ranch that edged the Bar Seas. And at that time, my granddad knew him. I think this was about 1886. And he had met him, and they visited, became friends. And Rogers wanted to visit some of the old cowboys that he knew when he worked this area. And he came to my granddad's place, and we gathered all of them up. I can remember one of them was my grandmother's brother-in-law, Dave Lard, and I think a man by the name of Jeb Todd, and Brainerd, Ben McIntyre's great-grandfather, and they met down on Johns Creek. And what I can remember is he could tell a story that would just make a young kid's eye just stand and stare at him with your mouth open and not even breathe. He was that good. But he impressed me, and that was probably the most famous person that I met while I was a child.
I just feel like that in the time that we've had, we've only skimmed the surface of Ralph Blodgett and his life. Is there anything else that you want to tell and let it go down on tape for future generations to hear?
Well, I hope I've left an impression, a good impression on people in my life. I'm a past master of Hansford Lodge here, Masonic Lodge, and a 50-year member of the Shrine and the Blue Lodge and the 32nd Degree Masonry, as well as the York Rite for over 50 years. I'm proud of that. My wife and I was raised in the Christian church, but when you marry a stubborn Presbyterian woman, you become a Presbyterian. So with my wife and Max and Dorothy Baggerly and Mert Bohannon and some other people, we started the Presbyterian church here many years ago. And it still survives, which we're small in number, but we think we have a mission as a church. We are joined with the Lutheran Church here now and share a minister. We each have our own faith, and we're respected. And we meet 1 month in our church, in the Presbyterian Church, one in the Lutheran Church, and everybody's happy. And that's the way I'd like to serve. I think I gave the best I had to the city. I gave the best I had to my family. I gave the best I had to the state of Texas. And I gave all that was asked for me, of me, in the service. And that's the way it is.
I don't think that there's any better words to end with. I think that that says it all, Ralph. That you've, for the things that you've done, you've cared deeply for, and you've done your very best. And I don't think that's. I think that's the best mark that you can leave on this world. And I think people in Spearman are very thankful that they had you as a mayor. And I know I was here when that was going on. And we want to thank you for all your years of service and dedication to both the business community, the community in general, and the city of Spearman.
I would be remiss, I think, if I let this go without saying something about our children. Glenn is a veterinarian, doctor of veterinary medicine. He's been at the 4-6 Ranch in Guthrie for about the last 12 or 13 years. And his two children, Buffy and Brandy, two girls. Buffy graduates at Baylor this year, and Brandy, the youngest, is a junior at Oklahoma State. And she tells me she's going to finish up at Tech, which makes it kind of dear to my heart. And Marilyn lives here, and she has two children, Grady, who is presently going to college at Amarillo College, and Bethany, who's in high school. And Marilyn works for me at B&B Farm Industries, and Dennis was a deputy sheriff here, her husband, until he was unable to continue. He was a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne Division and served 3 tours in Vietnam. And on one or more of the tours, he came in contact with Agent Orange and developed a melanoma cancer, and it's really hard on him, and he's not able to work anymore. And we ask everybody's prayers for him. And Joanne, of course, she came from 2 pioneer families, not in Hansford County, but in Hemphill County. Her mother was a Schaller, who the Schallers came to Canadian in the same year my granddad did, in 86. And her dad was a Studer, and her granddad came to Canadian in 1886. I guess that was the Great Migration.
It sounds that way.
Mainly it was because that's the year that the Santa Fe Railroad passed Glacier on its way through Canadian on to Pampa, and Miami, Pampa, and White Deer, and on into Amarillo. But so she came from old pioneer stock too. And that's about all I've got left in me to tell, I think.
Okay. Well, Ralph, we sure thank you for coming and sharing your stories with us. And like I said, we appreciate your dedication to Spearman. We've been visiting this morning with C. Ralph Blodgett, former mayor and owner of B&B Farm Industries. And we hope that you've enjoyed this interview. We thank you for listening.
KRDF-FM, Spearman, Texas, serving all of Hansford County.